Hey guys, I haven't done a deck guide or video for actually quite a while. I've been away doing tournaments and various things like that. Had a good time and all, but back to the pro ladder grind and all the rest of it with streaming and YouTube and all this stuff. So thought I'd bring you a video today on Handbuff since I actually haven't got one on the channel yet, and it's a pretty powerful and popular Nilfgaard deck at the moment. Um, Probably tier 1, I would say, in terms of the Nilfgaard decks, but it's one of these decks that gets countered quite easily, similarly to the Consume if your opponent has lots of hard removal cards, things like Coral or Artifact Compression or Scorch, stuff like that. But it's very powerful all the same, and if you play it in the right meta or you find the right matchups, then it's going to be doing a lot of work, as we'll probably see later on. But yeah, let's walk through the idea of the deck and the cards and sort of show you how it works after that. So the basic idea with Handbuff is pretty unique. It's not really like any other deck in the meta. You could compare it to Consume kind of in that it has some setup plays and the deck is built around a strategy, very one specific strategy. You play for that, and then you get a lot of value later on in the game. But that's kind of the only similarity. So Handbuff, what it's doing is effectively you're using the leader Emir to return a card to your hand after you've buffed it up. You've buffed up its base strength using Mandrake. So the whole idea is you get this big unit into your hand with the Emir, with the Mandrake buffing it up. This is usually a Nilfgaardian Knight you return to your hand, but it can be the Manticore return to your hand using Glorious Hunt here, or even King of Beggars if you're choosing to use that card. Maybe a Sire sometimes as well, or Guardian. All these big high strength cards that you could put in your deck or keep out depending on what version you want to run. But yeah, the idea is you have one of these in your hand, you've buffed it with Mandrake, and then you start going to town with all sorts of buffs, these hand buff cards. So we have spotters, which are boosting themselves by a revealed unit's base strength. So you're going to want to be revealing that big unit in your hand using either Alchemist or Leo Bonhart, potentially even Nilfgaardian Knight to reveal your own unit. But typically Alchemist or Leo. You're going to reveal the big unit, then you're going to play spotters for huge amounts of points every time. So that's one of the cards that synergize really well with the big buffed dude. And the other one is Wyvern Scale Shield, which boosts by the base power of a unit again. And this works really well with Magni Division, which pulls those out of the deck. So these Magni Divisions, you're playing them down, you're thinning through your deck, you're making sure you don't brick with them, therefore mulliganing away Wyvern Scale Shields. And you're just playing huge points with the Magni Divisions and Spotters after you've done all your setup. So that's the idea. You have Reconnaissance to thin through your deck and guarantee those combo pieces, the things like the Knights and the Alchemists, and then the Spotters later on, of course. And you have, the Mandrake, you have Vesemir to tutor for it, you have the Leo, you have Royal Decree to tutor for those two, as well as Triss as a very powerful finisher card that you can use. All really strong golds and really necessary for this deck. You have Cantarella, the Spy is of course important, and it works pretty well with a Leo giving you a big target, especially when pulled by Alza's Double Cross, that you can then damage with the Leo ability. So that works really nicely. And of course, Double Cross will then pull Knight after Cantarella, and after that Asaya, Swears, you get the idea. So this is just allowing you to find, either your Spy or your Knights, which are effectively the combo pieces for this deck. So that is again a bit of thinning and allowing you to, tutor for these combo pieces. Glorious Hunt can be another Nilfgaardian Knight, and sometimes it acts as removal, which this deck is kind of lacking, since you only have the Leo Bonhart and that Glorious Hunt to shut things down with, of course, the Manticore Venom for 13 damage. And finally, we have Asaya, which is a standard in basically every Nilfgaard deck. Just a very powerful card, can shuffle back opponent's cards, shuffle your own back, brick their draws, that sort of thing, or maybe do a double Mandrake if you're up against a mirror, or, there's all sorts of things you can do with Asaya. More of the advanced tactics, I guess, with the deck. But yeah, finally we have Swears. This is kind of the flexible slot for this deck. You could run quite a few things. You could run Guardian, you could run Peter for the mirror. But I like Swears, it really helps against Consume, which typically is quite a hard matchup for this deck, since Consume is doing a very similar thing to Handbuff, but just a little bit you know, more carryover value, so you're going to lose in the long term with Handbuff. But yeah, that's the deck. So the whole idea, you know, you're pulling this unit back to your hand, you're revealing it, and then you're going crazy with all these bronze cards. And that's basically the premise. We'll see it in action now, so we're going to hop into some gameplay. Alright, so jumped onto Pro Ladder. Have been playing a lot of this on Pro Ladder recently, trying to get my scores up. If you're interested in that at all, feel free to check out the stream. Of course, quick sell-out moment, but I'm sure most of you are already aware. Anyhow, so with mulligans, we want to be getting rid of Wyvern Scale Shields typically, because those are going to be pulled out by Magni Division, and also we want to drop Spotters a lot of the time, because, you know, they require some setup to play them early on. You need the Leo, you need to reveal that night after doing all those plays, and they're not immediate points, whereas Magni Divisions into Shields are once you've pulled the unit back. So Spotters are a little bit clunky sometimes. We can get rid of one or two here. And the other thing is that if your opponent plays revives, things like Vikovara Medic or Caretaker, then Spotters are really bad to have in your own graveyard because they can take them and use the full value of that Spotter themselves. So once again, we'll get rid of Spotter here. Swizz is actually going to be very nice in this matchup, allowing us to do some things on his commandos, and this hand looks pretty okay. I mean, we can probably hold on to this. We don't want to brick with our 4th gold, we don't want to brick with a Wyvern Scale Shield. You know, it's half a brick since we don't have any Magnis in hand right now, but we could do in the future. And we'll just, you know, run through the basic idea of the deck. So here, this is a perfect Swizz target. We can hit the commando and really just neutralize the value of the Blue Stripe Scout. And there are even 3 in the deck. He's playing Vernon Roach. We get some more information there as well, which is nice. And yeah, so when you're from behind and you have Glorious Hunt in hand, you can obviously use this to get the Manticore, and that's going to be a really nice buff target. However, we are up against Foltest, which might be running Selkirk, so we're going to go ahead and start with the Nilfgaardian Knight, just to maybe bait some removal, some kind of Selkirk play. You know, potentially get that targeted on the knight instead of, or even on Swizz, as it turns out. But yeah, sometimes they're going to kill your buff target, which could be a problem. So here we'll just bait the removal and then go with the 13 strength target, which is of course a little bit better than the knight at 12. We'll pop it here. And yeah, our next play will be that Royal Decree into Vesemir, pulling the Mandrake and Emiring the Manticore back to hand. Or the opponent will pass, and we're happy to take that. I mean, we're winning on even, and we then have Spy to do stuff. Of course, the opponent's thinking, well, you know, we've seen some hand buff targets. Not too scared if they aren't able to, you know, buff up that big card into their hand and do all that stuff. But we're pretty fine. We can always use a Sire for that purpose, or we can maybe shuffle back Knight or something of that nature. But here, I think we're going to mulligan Spotter again, just to have a little bit more of a look at our deck. Now here, we're kind of we have so many options, right? Like we can play Cantarella, we can go with Magni Divisions just for points. We can play a Sire and get our buff target, which, you know, will probably be a Sire at some point. Yeah, I think we're just going to go with Cantarella, open up with that, have another look at what we're being given, and Magni Division is probably the pick here, since we can do some thinning with it and then get our Spotters later with the reconnaissances. So one thing we do have to be a little bit worried about is a potential Spotter from reconnaissance. It's not going to be great. Of course, we would like to find Nilfgaardian Knight though from the reconnaissance to get a nice buff target. A Sire is not the end of the world if we have to take that. We can also play it to shuffle some bricks into the opponent's deck, since they've already played Blue Stripe Scout. These are not going to pop out anymore, which is quite nice. So honestly, that's probably the safer play. If we wanted to be risky, we could go for these kind of reconnaissances. I think we're going to be safe here and just shuffle back, you know, some bricked cards into the opponent's deck. I suppose we could shuffle back Knight if we wanted, but it's not necessary unless we're really expecting some kind of removal on a Sire from the opponent. But you know, we already saw the Selkirk, so we're not too worried about that. So this is your standard play, which you want to do in round 1 typically, but our opponent let us go to round 2, which is really nice. And it's the Emir into either Mandrake or Vesemir. Here we have Royal Decree into Vesemir, and we're able to play the Mandrake on the Asaya in this case, which is, you know, unusual. Usually you want to hit Knight, or you want to be hitting the Manticore back into your hand. But Asaya is also a good target. You know, it's 17 points that you can buff all your dudes with. So Not bad at all. And you'll see, you know, our Swears has really damaged these scouts in terms of the points they're giving, which is very nice. So now we're basically free to drop Magni Divisions, Leo, and then Spotters, should we want to do that. Typically, you want to save Spotters for round 3 if you're against these decks that have revive effects that can take your Spotters from your graveyard. So we're not too worried about that against Foltest. They don't have any graveyard hate in that sense. But, you know, something to keep in mind in other matchups. So yeah, we'll begin with the Magni divisions. We're going to get some thinning, you know, trying to reliably get down to that bronze core of spotters and things like that. We can maybe even recon out to fish for the bad cards, the Nilfgaardian Knight now and the Alchemist, which are going to be a little bit less ideal at this stage in the game. And it looks like we do have a forfeit. The opponent knows we have too many points to deal with, and he does not have any answers to that. So yeah, we'll jump into the next game right now. Alright, we've got our second game against a Bruva player, and this is probably a good time to talk about matchups as well, since Bruva is one of the worst matchups for Handbuff, so maybe we'll get a look at how this deck can struggle and what it does struggle against. So yeah, with the mulligan once again, we don't have any spotters or shields this time round, but we do know Swears is going to be bad, especially against Shoop if the opponent's playing that, so we're going to drop Swears, get rid of him. We have a Knight, which is perfectly fine, ADC is pulling Cantarella, and we have a Mandrake as well as Vesemir with the Royal Decree in hand, so we're probably going to throw away Mandrake. It shouldn't be too good to have both of those in hand, because of a Glace from the opponent. We would prefer to be able to shuffle our Mandrake back into our deck and not reuse it with the Vesemir, so that a Glace isn't finding it later in the game. And we can finally drop Alchemist because we have Leo in hand. This has, you know, been a pretty relaxed mulligan. We haven't had too many bricks or anything. But yeah, so as I was saying, with matchups, Emir, you know, this Handbuff deck has some really good matchups. It has Death Wish, which is just superb. You almost always win against that. Foltest, similarly, very, very good. And any of these sort of second-rate decks with not a lot of hard removal, things like the Brand Boats deck, for example, or Veterans, stuff like that, Handbuff has a really great time dealing with. And Consume as well is pretty good to beat if you're running the Swears version. So those are kind of the good matchups for this deck. And then the bad matchups, the Greatswords is probably unfavored a little bit. You can win it on red coin, but it's tricky because they have Igni and Coral a lot of the time, as well as their engines, which you can't interrupt. And also, you know, Shoop tends to be a bit of an issue because a lot of these decks are running Madrome at the moment, which really does destroy your points. On top of, you know, Shiru, Aglace, Shoop, and all this stuff. So we'll play it out, see how it goes, but not too hopeful. We do have Nilfgaardian Knight to open with, and this is going to be our target that we're pulling back into the hand, it looks like. We do have a bit of room on red coin. On blue coin it's harder, but you'll often have to go 2 cards down. Not the end of the world if that happens. You're similarly to Consume, relying on the power of the bronzes later on to sort of carry that card difference. And, you know, you might run into difficulties if you run into a lot of hard removal, Ignis, Scorches and stuff, but apart from that, you're going to be able to overpower the opponent's cards, which is really nice. So yeah, we'll go with the Emir play now, pull that Knight back, we'll grab the Vesemir, of course, and then we're going to be able to play Cantarella with Leo at some stage as well. And it should be good. But most likely the issue here is our opponent's going to have a lot of ways to deal with our big units. They're going to have Madromes, they're going to have that Shiru, and they're going to have, on top of that, just points from their, you know, regular cards. So a little bit scary, and Bruva is definitely one of the hardest to play against. You do have a shot at winning, but it's pretty difficult. You need to sort of hope they don't draw all of the answers. Hope that you can get to round 3 with some of your big cards still around and not getting removed, which, you know, isn't always the case, but we'll see how it goes here. The shield, of course, isn't ideal, but, you know, we're in an okay spot now. We can push ahead with Magni Division. That's what we're going to do. Of course, taking the buff from the Knight and buffing the Magnet Division. You usually want to be buffing the smaller units, so the things like Mandrake are getting less value, things like Scorch are getting less value, and of course always try to play around that Shiru that the opponent might have, or that Igni that they might be playing in their Skellige deck, that sort of thing. But here come the Madromes effectively, so he's going to be playing Merc into Madrome, Sage into Madrome, potentially Triss into Madrome. going to be a little bit of a pain to deal with, but we'll see if we can make it work. So here we could go with just Leo, or we could play Owl's Double Cross if we wanted. If we do that, we are going to go 2 cards down, but it's going to secure us the round. Not 2 cards down, sorry, 1 card down. Maybe it's too much of a commitment at this stage, so we're probably just going to go ahead and play that Leo on the 18 and just hit the 10. We're not losing too much value, and it's allowing us to play our reconnaissances safely without potentially bricking Magni and things like this, as we can take Spotter if we need to. And, you know, it does give the opponent a pass if they want to do that. But, you know, we've done our setup at this point, so at this stage we're just slamming points as much as we can, really. Opponent's going to go with a fog just to sort of secure some long round value should it go longer. Hopefully that won't be too great for them because the round's not going to be that long here. And we're always thinking about whether we could actually spy and then potentially take the win on even if the opponent passes. Right now, it doesn't seem like it's possible to do because the spy is going to be 15 points plus weather is going to deal 4 damage to us. So got to be aware of that. But instead, we're going to go with recon. We're going to do some thinning, and you know we can take the spotter here. It's a lot of points. The knight is also not terrible to take. It will be tanking the fog damage, but taking the spotter is good because we're going to find some more of that removal from him. Get that stuff out the deck that we don't want to see from him. The Sage, the Triss, you know, the Shiru, all those cards. And that's going to be our best shot at winning if we can cut down what he's got in terms of powerful plays left. And, you know, maybe keep a Triss or something for ourselves into round 3. Going to be tricky. And, you know, you've always got to watch out for the Shoop Charm in this matchup as well, which can just really crush you if they find it. So it's all a little bit scary. This is presumably Barclay. I'm going to pull some big, powerful cards out of the deck. And yeah, the Magni Division brick is a little unfortunate, but if we don't find if we don't have to take Magni with Reconnaissance, we can play the Wyvern Shield and the Magni, and either get rid of the dead Magni later on, or play a Sire and shuffle back Shield to unbrick it in the future. So we're thinking about that. Right now, we're happy to go with the Recon again, and we could take Spotter. I'm actually inclined to take Alchemist because it does keep us ahead still, and it doesn't play so much into that sort of Shiru that he might have. He does have Sage in hand that we can spot, and a Pyrotechnician. You always want to be playing one row against Shoop if you can, to avoid Pyrotechnician value, because some decks do run that. But anyhow, we do know that we are now free to play Magni Division and Shield this round, as well as, you know, anything else we want to play. We'll go with the Magni, thin it out. We can always, of course, mulligan the Shield if we want to do that. And, you know, we want to be playing around Shiru. We also want to be playing around the Sage. So we're just going to buff the smaller dude. Doesn't really matter. And then, of course, the Shield from hand, we can play around the Shuru or whatever with that. And we can maybe even play Triss this round as well if we want to do that. So now we're going to play Shield, probably on a Mir. This isn't going to line up at all with our Spotter unless, you know, Pyrotechnician does something funky, which, I mean, it's possible, I suppose. Now, and at this stage, we're kind of thinking, okay, well, I mean, not the best spot for us because we never want to play Nilfgaardian Knight round 1. That's pretty important. You need this card all the way into round 3, so that's kind of your never play card in this deck. We can go with a Spy here and then catch up with Triss, hopefully. So not too bad. And the question is, do we want to take Knight into hand or Spotter? So we're losing 4 points effectively, which puts us at 51 and the opponent to 57. So we're going to need 28 points. If I'm doing the math correctly, which, you know, Triss does not get us. So I'm actually going to take the Nilfgaardian Knight here, because that's going to give us more spotters in the deck and allow Triss a better chance at hitting a spotter when we play her for reconnaissance, should the opponent pass, and that will just mean that we have a better chance at taking the round in one card. Otherwise, we might be in trouble. As it turns out, he does in fact have Yavin, so we're not too worried about that happening. And we'll see what we want to do now. We do have options. We probably just want to play the Nilfgaardian Knight if it catches up. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually because of the fog tick. So we either have the decision between Triss to burst ahead or play Knight. He passes and then play Triss after. You know, potentially play Knight. He plays a good card and then we play Triss. There's a lot of things. I think we're going to go with the Triss though, just because we're a little bit, you know, we want to push this around if we can a little bit more, get some more from him, maybe a Shiru or something good like that. And, you know, if we just end up winning the round, that would be really good as well. So we're going to take that Spotter. We'll throw him in the fog because it's going to limit sort of Shiru value and stuff like that if he waits on it. And then hopefully you know, maybe he'll have another way like Triss or something to kill the spotter. If not, or a Glace. If not, we'd be in pretty good shape to keep pushing. But here, you know, we're left with two cards we don't really want to play. We don't want to play the Knight because obviously it's not enough to catch up, and we never want to throw the Knight away from hand. But you know, we traded Triss for a Glace, which isn't a bad trade in all honesty. And since we won the coin flip, we're not too worried about getting bled down, unless he maybe goes for Shoop card, but that's pretty unlikely. So now the real aim is to play out bricks, basically. We can probably mulligan the Knight here. It's going to be the least useful. Potentially Glorious Hunt is worse. But that's at least 13 points in a lot of cases. And Asai is pretty helpful because we can probably shuffle a brick into his deck here, along with, you know, a potential, you know, not brick target with the shield, and that's what we are going to do now. So shield goes back in along with Cantarella. It might also be right to put Barclay back in to weaken Hattori from the opponent, but I think our chances are better if we're able to make him brick rather than, you know, going for our own you know, going for making him have slightly less points. I think it's better to try for that full brick. Probably our best chance of winning. With this hand, we kind of have to hold on to it. Glorious Hunt's not going to be great, but it will at least do some damage. We really can't afford to brick Magni Division, and our draws aren't much better. We have, you know, Nilfgaardian Knight in the deck and stuff like that. So we could try to play around Shoop, but Shoop Charm is going to crush us pretty much, you know, whatever happens here. So we're just going to go ahead and open with Magni Division onto the Knight. We then have a Spotter with Reconnaissance guaranteed, and we have Glorious Hunt. Manticore Venom deals some damage. You'll see our bronzes are just huge at this point, but he is playing the one deck that has sort of counters to the huge points that we have, so that's kind of a problem, but we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to play the Spotter next because, of course, he doesn't have a 13 strength unit for us to damage with the Manticore Venom. And, of course, once again, Shoop Charm could be pretty powerful. It may, in fact, turn out that he doesn't even have, you know, a big enough unit for us to hit with this, but we're safe to play Nilfgaardian Knight first, of course. We'll throw it down here. We're playing around Igni as well, which is always nice. But Shiru would be pretty painful. And honestly, if we have to play this for a 4-point card, that might be our undoing. That might be our downfall in this situation. But we'll see. Going to be a pretty close game either way. We've actually managed to make it to a round 3 where he doesn't have, you know, too many points. Unfortunately, yeah, there is the Shiru, and 4-point cards is not looking great for us. We're just going to have to deal 4 damage and potentially lose out a little bit there. But no, the opponent forfeits. He doesn't have it. So yeah, wow, a win against Shoop. That's not too common with this deck, in all honesty. But just shows you the power of the bronzes. If they don't draw perfectly or don't draw their Shoop or whatever, you can be in a good shape even against the worst matchups. So I think Handbuff is a very powerful deck. You know, 2 pro ladder wins right there, and I've been climbing it a lot these past few days. So yeah, feel free to give it a go. And I just thought I'd have this deck up here for reference for either new players or people who are interested in picking up new archetypes. But yeah, that'll be me done for today, guys. So thanks a huge amount for watching. Feel free to leave any nice and friendly or not so friendly feedback in the comments, and I will be sure to see you next time.